Tonight on Talking Politics, from fears of political violence to the state of the presidential race, the head of the Massink polling group joins me on the results of his new poll for GBH News and Commonwealth Beacon. But first, I'm joined now by Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell to talk about a bevy of issues, including her lawsuit against the town of Milton and her new effort to crack down on youth sports betting. Attorney General, thank you for being here. Or General, I should say. I always get that salutation
Folks
wrong.
go back and forth, but it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I remember watching you campaigning with then Attorney General Maura Healey in the last election cycle, and you had her very, very enthusiastic endorsement. She was casting you as a partner in governance. But you made it clear on the campaign trail, and you've made it clear since taking office, that you want to bring your own distinct approach to the job. What differentiates your approach to being AG from your predecessors?
Well, one, I think we make this clear, all of us, that when an AG comes in, you build upon the legacy of those who came before. And so I'm doing just that. I think our goal, of course, is to continue, I think, to modernize the office. Frank Bellotti really started that, and of course, he turns 101 this year, and he has continued to be a great mentor and advisor and counselor to me.
You're still getting advice from him?
Absolutely. I just saw him at an event that he co-hosted with a few folks for me.
That is remarkable.
Yes.
Giving advice when you're about to hit 101.
Yeah. And he looks fabulous. I will say he looks better than a lot of elders I'm in conversation with these days. But he, along with others, have continued to offer advice and counsel. And we are continuing to modernize the office. And what does that mean? We have, over 600 employees across 4 different offices. We want to continue to make this office accessible to everyone. We have an office in Springfield, Worcester, New Bedford, and hiring into those offices has been really important, not just Boston. We're also establishing new units. We got the Police Accountability Unit off the ground, the Elder Justice Unit, the Gun Violence Prevention Unit, the Reproductive Justice Unit, and soon a new housing unit. All of these new units not only modernize the office, but make sure that the work we're doing is intersectional across all the divisions and bureaus.
And tell me if I'm right, those units are not necessarily enormous when it comes to staff, but they've got a couple people who serve as point persons for these efforts and try to tie everything together. Is that a fair characterization?
That's right. So they have directors or a director and a deputy. The goal, of course, is to continue to resource these units, and the legislature has been really helpful in that regard. But that modernizes the office, I think, in many ways, because it begins to make these units not only relevant to what people are talking about, but also intersectional, so we're not doing the work in a siloed way. Focus on these issues locally, but of course leading nationally. And I will just add, the sets of issues we're going to focus on may differ, whether it's government accountability and police misconduct while working with law enforcement to bring about greater transparency and accountability. Gun enforcement and gun violence prevention is at the top of the list. Everything having to do with housing is at the top of the list as we address issues of affordability. And then lastly, economics. A real focus on issues of economics, where I don't know that that has necessarily been what people typically expect from an AG's office.
That was actually, you perfectly anticipated my next question for you, because one of the things I remember being struck by as you stumped was you saying that the AG's office could act as a facilitator of economic mobility. How can your office do that?
In significant ways. Actually hired someone for the first time ever who is in the executive bureau of the office as my senior advisor to economic mobility and opportunity, whose job it is to look across the office to make sure we're using our tools to advance economic opportunity. That means taking on student loan debt. We are at the forefront of that work right now. Everything having to do with closing the racial wealth gap and using and focusing on housing as a tool to do that. Also focusing on legislative efforts to be able to do this. So there's a lot that we can do, along with our consumer protection issues. We have guidance out now, proposed guidance on junk fees, all those hidden fees. So we're actively working with stakeholders to finalize those. And so just everything you can think about in terms of scams, consumer protection, policy issues, in terms of economics and affordability, we're putting at the forefront, because we know the #1 issue that folks are talking about right now in Massachusetts is that it's too expensive to live here, to work here, and we have a direct role to play in changing that.
I'd like to hear a little more from you about the youth sports betting coalition that you recently rolled out with former Governor Charlie Baker and others. Before you explain what exactly that's going to be doing, let's hear from former Governor Baker, now NCAA President Baker, talking about threats received by one particular team in the lead up to a championship event, I believe last year.
We had a championship at one point last year where we thought the threat that had been delivered by a bettor to a particular team was severe enough that we gave them 24/7 police protection until they left the tournament. Now, I don't know about you, but knowing that I have 24/7 police protection might make me feel better in one way, but it probably had a pretty significant impact on the quality of their play.
What is this new youth sports betting coalition going to do, and why is it necessary?
It's critical. I really put my head down in year one to develop our strategic plan for the office, focused on 5 different pillars, government accountability being one of those pillars, and economics, of course, another, but youth and young people. I'm an AG, but I'm a mom of 2 young boys, and the well-being of our youth also rises to the top. And one area of focus is not just on their mental health, which we're focused on, but also their economics too. And youth betting, I think, combines both. On the one hand, we don't want young people who are of age to be placing bets and going into any type of debt or developing an addiction. So we are focusing our efforts on that audience, but also at the same time, those who are actually illegally not supposed to be betting, who might be between the ages of 18 and 21, focusing our efforts there. So this target audience, this coalition has come together to say, how do we develop a curriculum, for example, so they know about the pros, the cons, the risk when getting involved? How do we also educate them that it is illegal to place a sports bet, for example, when you're between 18 and 21? And this is relevant because now we have, of course, online sports betting here in Massachusetts for the first time, something that can become addictive at the same time readily available on a very addictive device. So we have a direct role to play with working with our Gaming Commission to make sure folks are aware of the risk, to offer them protection where we can, and to make sure that it's safe and responsible. And every sports team in Massachusetts has joined these efforts, and really grateful for their partnership and collaboration.
I'm curious, when I have heard you talk about gambling, whether it's in this particular context or before when you were talking about, if I recall correctly, tightening up that needed to be done when it came to regulations around sports betting, I've always had the impression that personally, you sort of wish we hadn't legalized sports betting, but that it's here now and you're going to try to make it work as well as it possibly can. Am I right about that?
I don't have any position on it. I personally don't bet. I mean, if I go to a casino with some girlfriends, maybe I go with my $50, and if I lose that 50, then I didn't leave to go about my business. So take no position there. If anything, it is here, and it is the law of Massachusetts. We want to make sure, as we work with operators, the Gaming Commission, and our constituents, young people and parents, that they understand what their rights are, that they understand the legal landscape, and that we're doing everything in our power to protect young people from any potential addiction and all the other addictions that come with it, whether it is substance use disorder, alcoholism, going into debt. There is a role for us to play, and if we do it with our sports teams in particular, where young people, they might be the best messenger versus their AG, there's a way in which to really be impactful here so that it is safe and responsible. And also kudos to operators who also want to step up and I think do their part. They've separately started a coalition around the same messaging. We want to see if we can bring together some of these efforts too.
Your office recently released a report. I believe you had released one last year as well, but you're tracking these so-called competitive electric suppliers. And I believe the most recent report that you put out said that they've cost Massachusetts residents close to $600 million over the span of about 8 years. And you're pushing the legislature to ban them. Is the legislature going to do that?
I hope so. We have been working on this aggressively because not just this recent report, but the reports before have made it crystal clear that consumers are not winning here. Only the competitive electric supply companies. They are making a profit by targeting largely poor neighborhoods, communities of color,
Yeah.
with all types of aggressive sales tactics, some of which are illegal, to get them to buy a product they know will actually not bring them any savings, but will bring them losses, and sometimes significant losses. So the office has done and continues to field hundreds of complaints from consumers. We're responding to them to either get their money back, cancel these contracts, or even taking on some of these providers to say, don't do this business here. But the thing is, our tools are there's only so much we can do. Sometimes when we win a case against one of these competitive electric suppliers, they file for bankruptcy. So we can't get the resources, that restitution. So it really is up to the legislature not to ban their whole book of business. On the commercial side, they're doing quite well. Keep doing that. They're bringing about savings. But on this individual residential market side, they are not. And other states have seen this. So we're pushing for a ban on that.
I just want to make sure I understand the difference between the commercial side and the residential side. What is the commercial side?
So the commercial side is if they're selling their products, competitive electric suppliers, to a business.
Gotcha.
Businesses are actually realizing savings. We haven't seen any complaints necessarily there.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Where the complaints are the individual residential markets. And they have been smart about this. It's not targeting every neighborhood. It really is focusing on the most vulnerable, the communities of color, immigrant communities, where folks are going to, or some of our seniors and elders, promising them that they're going to make savings if they leave their utility company. And what we're finding is they're not. And there's no way to reverse course. There's no way for them to suddenly bring about savings. And while there may be some alternative solutions in terms of more regulation, we say the laws are enough. We don't need more regulations. We don't need more laws. We need the legislature to wipe out this ban of business so these folks stop offering predatory businesses and products, I should say,
to residential.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
exactly.
Is there a pro-competitive electric supplier constituency at the State House that would balk at doing this? I mean, there
are lobbyists. So there are lobbyists who are representing these suppliers who are showing up at the State House and lobbying for this not to happen. And we're saying we don't represent the lobbyists, we represent the people. And if we go out into constituencies and into community, folks are sharing stories. There were recent reports on this where they did not realize the savings. Maybe they did in month one, but all of a sudden that was wiped out quickly. These are real stories. And as we talk about addressing issues of affordability, we want to make sure that people are not taking advantage of.
Yep.
And then on the flip side of this, our office is also about equity and economic dignity for folks. And when you are targeting our most vulnerable with a product you know will bring about losses, we have a real problem with that, as our job is to protect the consumer, and we're going to do that every single day.
I'd like to get an update on your lawsuit against the town of Milton for not complying with the MBTA Communities Act, which just people will remember this, but which requires communities that are on or near the T, served by the T, to create new zoning to allow multifamily housing to be built. Broad brush characterization there. What's happening right now with your lawsuit?
So we filed a lawsuit against Milton, but I want to take a step back because I think the media actually coverage of this issue isn't complete. And what I mean by that is, most towns are actually coming into compliance. So if you look at just the rapid transit communities, 11 out of the 12 have come into compliance. The only outlier is Milton, because all of these other communities realize something that we do too. There is a housing crisis, a housing affordability crisis in Massachusetts, and it is an emergency, we would say. We need more housing that is affordable. The MBTA Communities Law does just that. Obviously signed by Governor Baker, a Republican working with the Democratic legislature.
Not necessarily affordable housing, though, right? I mean, it ramps up production,
which should lead to more affordability. With the goal of creating housing that's affordable and accessible to residents. And towns have a say over that. They have the ability to push a developer who's coming in, building this as of right housing, to make it affordable, to make it accessible to their public employees, their elders who can't afford to live in their town or their community. So most communities get this, and they are actively working to come into compliance. Milton is an outlier. It's the exception to the rule and the norm.
We do tend to take an interest in outliers.
That's right. And so I want to highlight those towns because what I've heard is we're doing it. I just met with someone recently at an event who's in Dedham, who's on their planning board and says we're doing everything we can to come into compliance. And it's not that hard. And we're going to work with communities to offer technical assistance, as is, of course, our housing agency too, and Secretary Augustus. We are offering flexibility in our regulations, et cetera. You can't build, for example, as Milton said, near the rapid transit because there's not enough land. Great.
Right.
We're going to change the regulations to allow you to build it somewhere else in Milton, which is, I think, a really great point because at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us to address this crisis. And I don't sue communities and municipalities lightly. We put out the advisory early on to say it's not voluntary, it's mandatory. Milton said we're not a rapid transit community. The state said, yes, you are. So we've sort of been working every step of the way, and now we're in this position where we hope to resolve it, with the court obviously playing a role.
Let me ask you, we've got a minute and a half left, so I'm
Yeah.
going to hustle. From a layperson's point of view, the fact that the law includes sanctions for communities that do not comply has made me think, well, wait a minute, how can we say that noncompliance isn't an option when the consequences are laid out there in the law? What am I missing?
So when you say, our focus is it's a mandatory law, municipalities have to comply, it's not voluntary. Even if you give up state funding, it is mandatory. We made that crystal clear last year. And we're going to do everything we can to work with municipalities to bring them into compliance, offering flexibility, resources, and technical assistance so they can do that. Milton received 2 grants to be able to do that. We want to say we want to do this together. It should not be adversarial.
You don't want it to be adversarial.
And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be at all.
In 45 seconds, if you can do it, how relieved should people in Massachusetts be that former President Trump has said that he does not support a national abortion ban?
They should not be relieved. I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. And why is that? He has proven to be someone with a flawed character and to lack integrity. And for me, if you care about what we're attempting to do here in Massachusetts on economics, on everything related to reproductive justice and affording people access to reproductive health care, you need a partner at the federal level. The best partner right now is President Biden and Vice President Harris. It is not Trump. And so no one is perfect, but if we want to get things done here for Massachusetts, we really have to step up, vote, get involved, and get engaged. And reproductive justice issues, I think, are making it clear that this is probably going to be one of the #1 issues where people should turn out, and they should.
All right, Attorney General Andrea Campbell, thank you for being here and talking all this through.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, it should come as no surprise that Massachusetts residents are leaning heavily towards Joe Biden in the race for president. He's 18 points ahead of Donald Trump, according to a new GBH News Commonwealth Beacon poll conducted by the Mass Inc. polling group. But there's another trend playing out in Massachusetts that could end up hurting Trump nationwide, and it is all about turnout. Mass Inc. polling group president Steve Koczela joins me now with more. Steve, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be back.
So you found, among other things in this poll, that President Biden leads former President Trump among people who are very likely to vote. His margin is, he's got 91%. 91% of Biden supporters are very likely to vote. 80% of Trump supporters. Why is this significant?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you compare that to all registered voters, in other words, if you ask anybody who could potentially vote, the margin's much smaller. So basically what that means is that the Trump campaign, if they want to do better here in Massachusetts, and the trend extends across other states, it's not just determining his margin in Massachusetts, what they need to do is basically get those less likely voters out. That's a pretty unfamiliar challenge for Republicans. In other recent competitive presidential elections, it's usually been the Democrats who are hoping that those less likely voters will turn out. So that's why it's significant, because it illustrates kind of what's going on across the country.
I was surprised by that finding because it seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, like there's a tension between it on the one hand, and on the other hand, what we've been hearing for months, which is that Biden supporters are more animated by a need to vote against Trump than they are passionate support for Joe Biden, while Trump voters seem genuinely excited about their candidate. Is there a tension between these two things?
There is, and how that tension plays out will be a big part of how the election ends up. When you look at, for instance, what words Biden voters or Trump voters or voters overall use, Trump voters are less likely to use words like disappointed, annoyed.
Yeah, let's pull up those numbers because these are, so overall, 48% of people said they were disappointed by a Biden-Trump rematch. 31% said they were annoyed. 23% said they were angry, but it's better for former President Trump. His voters are less likely to use those negative terms?
They are. They're less likely to use those negative terms and more likely to say that they're excited and interested and so forth. So the question, though, is Trump sort of has his base, but then it's the next slice of voters, the slice who typically on either side will show up and not necessarily be thrilled about the candidate, but will turn out anyway. And that's the group which is both less likely to turn out at all, and also is, in this case, the slice that Trump really needs. You know, we saw it show up in the primaries. We've seen it show up in sort of other venues. He needs them to come out, and he needs them to vote for him.
You also asked people how they feel about political tensions in the United States right now and how they feel about the prospect of violence in connection with the election. 72% of people overall said that political tensions in America today are either very bad or constitute a crisis. 64%, I believe, said that they thought it was either somewhat likely or very likely that we were going to see major violence in connection with the election. Those are pretty bleak numbers, right?
Yes, very sobering numbers. And the expectation or the anticipation of the potential of violence isn't just confined to one group. You know, it extends across demographics, parties, geographies. It's not just like only Biden supporters or only Trump supporters. It's a fairly universal, concern at this point that, 2024 could potentially end in violence.
Let's talk about some state-focused issues that you got into in the poll, and there were a whole bunch. The public seems to be conflicted when it comes to the MBTA Communities Act, which requires communities near the T to zone for expanded multifamily housing. That's a broad brush description, but I think it gets to the gist of it. The public is of two minds when it comes to this law, right? Like they can't quite figure out how they feel about it.
Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of people who say they just don't know. But among those who do express an opinion, more people both think the law is good, it's good policy, but then think that towns should be able to opt out, but then also think that the state should be able to levy financial penalties against them. There's some interesting demographic breakdowns, certainly by party. Democrats are more supportive of the act overall across all three questions. Renters, key, obviously a key group when thinking about this policy, also more likely to support the
That makes sense intuitively.
Sure.
Yeah. What about this proposal to give Diana DiZoglio and all state auditors henceforth the ability to audit the state legislature? She's been pushing to do this. She can't do it right now, so she's pushing a ballot question that will let her do it moving forward if it all works out for her. How do people feel about that?
And so far, people who do have an opinion are in favor of it. Just over half of people that we asked, just over half of voters say that they're in favor of the proposal to let the auditor audit the legislature. And relatively few actually say they're opposed to it, but there's a lot who say they don't know. And why that's key in a ballot question is if you're pushing a ballot question, you want to be much higher. You want to be in the 60s and 70s, basically, as far as your support. Because what you're expecting is that the people who say, I don't know, a lot of them, even close to all of them, are expected to say, you know what, I don't get what this thing's about.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep things the way they are, which is a no vote. And then some of the yes people also, the no campaign, if there is one, will try to grab a few of those people just enough and just drag them across the line to pull that under 50%.
That's really interesting and a bit of political knowledge that I lacked until you just shared it with me. Because when I saw these numbers, let me just refresh my memory as to what they are. 53% saying that they would vote in favor, 12% saying no, 35% unsure. I just assumed that Diana DiZoglio was going to be pumping her fist, but it sounds like...
And certainly, that's a big margin to start with. And the task that she and her supporters will have is be sure that those undecideds don't have enough doubt introduced in their minds to push them to a no. They have to keep enough of those 53%. But the no campaign by default starts second in a ballot question because you get some supporters together, you have an idea, you put forward this question, and it's not until there's a question that any no side could even potentially form. So their campaign will be starting later, and that's why you want to be starting higher because you're expecting to bleed support to a certain extent.
Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. You looked at sports betting and the prevalence of sports betting, and I want to just pull up the top line number. The percent of Massachusetts residents who have placed a bet on sports in the last year, according to your poll. It's 30% for people ages 18 to 29, 35% for people ages 30 to 44, 45 to 59-year-olds is 23%, and then it's lower for people over 60. Why are those findings significant? What else did you find about sports betting habits?
Yeah, it certainly does go down, in upper age groups. The groups that tend to do it the most, men do it more, relatively younger people. It's not the youngest age group, of course, because if you're under 21, of course, you can't do it in Massachusetts yet at this point. That certainly was the case. And also closer to Boston, we found prevalence was a bit higher,
that's
sort of closer in as well.
And not something I necessarily would have anticipated.
I think it probably has to do with two things. One is demographics, of course, just the age of the population in Boston.
Yeah.
If young people are doing it more, then it will be more concentrated in Boston. Also sporting events, more likely to happen around here. So if you're, participating or viewing something or attending something and placing bets, sort of at the venue, that would be another reason that could happen.
I know we're releasing results next week involving the migrant crisis and how people in the state feel about it, about the way it's being handled. You can't share the results of the poll yet on that topic, but can you offer any sort of preview just to whet people's appetites?
Yes, definitely. So definitely check out the stories next week on that. But the question that we did ask that's out already is just what is the top issue on your mind that you think state leaders should be focusing on? And for years and years and years, it was very reliably education, the economy, and healthcare. And then housing in recent years has started to grow, and then COVID, took over everything for a little while. But this is the first time we've seen immigration and the migrant issue as the number one issue that people mention unprompted. There's not a list.
The number one issue.
Yeah, the number one issue. So, how that translates into what they feel policy-wise, that's what we'll be releasing next week.
That's a huge finding. All right, Steve Koczela, thank you very much for talking all of this through. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That is it for tonight, but do come back next week. And in the meantime, let us know what you think. The email's talkingpolitics@wgbh.org. The website's gbhnews.org/talkingpolitics. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Wait, did I just commit a crime? Hey folks, I'm Edgar B. Harwick III from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. Today's question comes courtesy of Betty Davis from Gloucester, Massachusetts, who wants to know, is it in fact a crime to remove these labels? Now, you find these guys on pillows, mattresses, even a lot of winter coats, and the reason why is because you cannot see what is inside of those items. Now, today, pillows, for example, are usually stuffed with feathers or cotton or some kind of synthetic material. But according to Maggie Terry, back in the day, they put some pretty gnarly stuff in the stuffing.
I mean, it used to be years ago, they'd throw anything they wanted to into the bedding. Newspapers, dirty rags.
Horsehair, used hospital or hotel mattresses, corn husks.
Sweepings off the floor, part of their lunches, droppings, I mean, anything.
For starters, that's disgusting, and furthermore, it's dangerous and unhealthy. So today, a lot of states require these labels that tell you what is inside of the item, and it is against the law to remove them. Sort of. Retailers and manufacturers can be fined if they remove the labels, but once you buy it or I buy it, if you read closely, most of these end with the line, "except by the consumer." So there you have it. Feel free to rip away. Don't forget to follow and tell us what you are curious about because, hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Harwick III. Stay curious out there.